area. In the last couple of years, the winds here have been just absolutely eerie. They get, I mean, it's like gale force winds in the middle of Kansas, you know, in the city. It's some of the strangest phenomena that's been going on weather-wise. Matter of fact, just 2 weeks ago, or not even 2 weeks ago, it was like 71 degrees here. And yeah, and you know, and then
we still have snow up here, and that's atypical for us.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that something's at least normal for you.
No. Well, I was going to say no. This is not typical for us at all.
Oh, it's not.
No, we get snow, but usually up in the mountains, not down in the lowlands.
Ah.
And we've been having persistent snow, 17 days of it in December, and then another go-round now. And we've also encountered the situation of hurricane or near hurricane force winds coming up out of the Pacific. Very unusual situation, even with the rotation that you normally get from our storms, which would seem to be like hurricanes. There isn't the pressure of the Caribbean kind of enclosure, so they usually dissipate. We don't usually get those large windstorms, but we've been getting them repeatedly through this year.
Yeah, it's and you know, that's just all part of everything. Not only the you know, us. I think it's most of it is us moving through, you know, the part of the solar system that we are. That's a huge part of it, as well as what we do on this earth, as well as everything that happens out in space. I mean, it's just a collective thing. It's not just a singular thing. It's just not. There's just not one thing that you can pinpoint and say, well, this is the reason for that.
No, it's pretty much the whole damn universe at the moment. Yep. That's why we say around here, you know, concentrate on your pie and don't worry about the rest of things.
That's right. That's right. Apple pie today.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'd like for you to do is to maybe quickly go through some points in some more points in the Report 5, but I'd really like to get to Report 6, as we've got a lot of stuff to cover there in Report 6, but I know that there's some things left in 5 that kind of builds into further explanation as you go into the Report number 6.
And that area of 5 that's got you interested?
Well, I really want you to get in with the whole, again, I know we've talked about it before, but there's a lot of stuff more that came out on the markets, the death of the dollar.
That actually I find relatively boring anymore because it's so depressing and so continuously down.
It is very depressing. I agree.
Basically, we have to. We look at everything here from an emotional viewpoint, and we attach emotional quantifiers and qualifiers to words. So we have a tendency to look at everything in a large brush emotional picture. And if we want to all think for a minute about the 1930s and the images that come from the previous Great Depression, especially at its depth in the, say, 33 through 37 period, one word comes up, and that is despair. But despair doesn't really go to the depth of the image that would come out of all of the photographs that we would see from there. But you would look at those photos and you would see despair in people's eyes. And here's the real problem. We haven't hit that point yet in this depression.
No.
That will start sometime in November and grow through August of 2000, maybe September of 2010.
Okay.
So that's when the despair period will come. What we're experiencing at the moment is, whether you want to look at it in any kind of metaphysical sense or not, which would include the acceleration of time, the cramming in of more events into seemingly smaller event space, leaving that aside, we have a situation of global instant communication, which is going to have a compounding effect on everything, and will also have a speeding up effect on everything. So we're likely to experience the range, in the way we think of it, we as a collective planet are going to experience the range of emotions from the previous depression in a much shorter time span this time around. So in that sense, it's going to be continuing degradation up until November of this year, more or less economically, and then it's going to get real worse for about a year. And in a sense, from now until November or so is going to be like from 1932 through to, say, 35. And then from November through September of 2010 is going to be 1936 through, say, 39 or 40.
Yeah, that is cramming a lot into a short period of time, less than a year. Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on then to the next aspect of number 5 that I wanted to kind of just have you touch on. We've got about 5 minutes before we have to take a little break here. The one that you lovingly call Space Coach Farts, Kemi Sweaty palms and cognitive cracks. I like that because you talk a little bit about chemtrails there.
Yeah. Chemtrails is an interesting phenomenon at all different levels, no matter where you want to examine it. Greatest conspiracy ever, the most blatantly denied, hushed up in your face in plain sight kind of conspiracy. But at the same time, it may be that in spite of all their ill effects, the chemtrails may be the things that, save a larger portion of humanity, because the idea is that they're there to change the albedo, that is to say the reflective characteristics of the planet, and they may actually end up saving us from excessive UV radiation storms that may be coming. And it's going to be it's going to be a race in essence. We're going to get to a crux of where we have a collapsing economy from which the black ops operations are no longer able to siphon vast quantities of money because it just won't be there.
Right.
And plus the collapsing economy focuses everybody's attention on money, and so it highlights auditing even more, putting more pressure on the black ops. So paying for chemtrails is going to become a little difficult. And then at the same time, we're going to have other secrets revealed kind of things come on out. They're going to put pressure on the whole system, just as we're going to reach this nasty period this summer when we're likely to find ozone holes floating around over populated areas to where we're going to need chemtrails to prevent UV radiation poisoning.
Well, isn't that just an interesting whole concept?
It's quite it's within the realm of the potentials that come from the predictive linguistics, because we have a very complex situation around the chemtrails. It's highly loaded emotionally, but there's all kinds of nuance for us to pick around in and see various different layers of the actual emotional constructs around the idea. And what we come down to is that the powers that be are very much behind keeping the chemtrails program going right up to the last minute with the last amount of resource. But they're also aware that they're in a race against a collapsing system that's collapsing at a systemic level. And so it's rotting from the inside out. So in that sense, we can think of the Obama administration as attempting to correct things from the outside in by shoving more debt into the system, but it's already rotten at its core, and it's collapsing towards them as fast as they can attempt to repair it. And somewhere in that continuum, the black ops people are going to actually just come to a particular day and run 100% out of money. And it's going to be rather embarrassing for them because they have all these continuing ongoing costs that just won't be able to be met. And basically what will occur is that, they'll go to a senator and say, we need, $9 billion. And the guy's going to say, for what? And they're going to say, well, for this particular program. And they're going to have to justify it and justify more and more and more. And it's going to get to the point where they're actually going to they're going to end up betraying that they only needed $1 million instead of the $9 billion, and that they were just going to siphon off the rest into their other operations. And that just won't be able to float anymore.
I kind of like all of that, don't you?
I sure do. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I do. And I think with that note, we will go ahead, though, Clif, and take a short break. We come back. We're going to wrap up report number 5 and then move right into 6 because there's a ton of information. So for the rest of you, don't go away. We're going to be right back with more Flip High. All right, everyone, welcome back. And you are listening to Journeys with Rebecca. And tonight's guest is Clif High. And we have a lot of people in the chat box, Clif, and there's a lot of questions. And again, I'm going to ask everyone to please refrain from some of your questions until Clif comes back after the top of the second hour, because we've got so much to cover. There's just reports are just absolutely filled with stuff. I mean, it's just really hard to absorb. You know it.
It's hard to write.
It's just so hard to absorb all of it. I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I have to read them sometimes a couple of times just to, at least get it to stick a little bit, Yeah. It's craziness. So anyway, back to, I'd like to wrap up report number 5 a little bit here. So let me see. I kind of got off there. Hang on just a second. Let me get to it. I was glad that you talked about the radiation stuff and, the chemtrails and all that, because that really was important for people. And we're
going to get strange effects from extra amounts of UV radiation breaking through the atmosphere. There's a number of different effects for it, and we needn't go into those now, but some of the rather interesting signs of it will be things like sweaty plants. The plants will actually react from the extraneous amounts of UV.
Oh my goodness.
So if if you notice your apple tree sweating or your roadie or something, and it's extremely atypical, and the sun seems to be extremely fierce, I wouldn't go out in it.
Right, right. And there's things that people can do, by the way, if they do think that they've been exposed, and that's not going to be covered here, but I urge people to go and search that stuff out too. That can help with things like that. But the best thing is to stay inside at times like that. Absolutely. Let's talk. You've talked about the Summer of Hell for the last few times you've been on. And I would like for you, as it pertains to report number 5, if there's anything else that you would like to specifically pull out of that to talk about that would also carry on into the report 6.
Right. Well, basically the Summer of Hell is death by 1,000 cuts. It's not merely one thing. It's the continuing economic crisis, the continuing unemployment crisis, the meltdown of the dollar, the currency problems, the international government problems, the result from the currency problems, the pressure on government from the populations going hungry because the food supplies are based on a production system that requires so much oil. The cost of oil, even though it's down, is up relative to food. We're going to have food crisis. We've got collapsing grain supplies, et cetera, and it's all going to combine to cause basically social unrest and the death of the social contract. And it comes down to looking at things at a very fundamental level, and that this year we're going to transform ourselves, willingly or not, into a much more aligned position with the fundamentals. And as an instance, we have the United States population at some 6.5–7% of the global population, consuming more than 28% of all of the resources. And that will change this year. Over the course of this year, it's not going to happen in a single day, but a lot of it's going to occur during summer. And that means that our 6.5 or 7% of the population had better produce 7 or 10% of the world's resources, because that's all we're going to be able to consume. And it won't have anything to do with anybody coming in and saying, no, you can't buy from us or any of that. It's going to basically be the combination of the destruction of the dollar and then very scarce resources, because we have so many people on the planet that we are pushing the limits of what the biota can supply us and the biosphere, and still be able to recover and carry forward another year. In other words, if you ate all of the wheat in the world, you wouldn't have any wheat to plant for the next year. And you have to allow resources the ability to recover. And we put such pressure on them that in combination with the interplanetary climate change that is specifically affecting us, they're at the very highest level of possible stress. And that will become very visible and evident this summer.
Yeah, I think those statistics are pretty astounding that we're using 28% right here in the United States. That's what does that tell you?
Yeah, and we're very wasteful too.
Well,
but that'll change.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. I've thought about that before. It's like restaurants that are made to throw out foods instead of giving it to local charities or the homeless.
But it's much deeper than that.
Oh, I mean, that's just a part of it.
Yeah, for the last 10 years, we've manufactured retail space in the United States at 5 times the rate of the population growth.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have to reduce retail space by 4/5 of the space created in the last 10 years, if you follow that logic, just to meet the demands of population growth.
Right. Exactly. I love it. Not. All right. Anything else that you want to say about report number 5 before we go into 6?
No, we can go into 6.
Okay. The first one that we start with is called Meta Arts 2012 Threat Matrix.
Yeah, we always start our reports with, we have 2 possible high-level areas of discussion. Meta arts, meaning outside of the linguistic art, or an examination of reality, if you will, and then metadata, which means a very broad top-level view of the data before we drill down into it. And in this one, we start our report off with a description in a table format of the possible threats as they relate to the appearance of 2012. A very key meme is everybody's starting to get really whipped up about 2012 and what it might mean for humans.
I agree.